Transgender matters have been in the news a lot recently, and there are an increasing number of cases that will be hitting our courts in the coming months. There have been cases about sports and washrooms and attire to be worn at graduation ceremonies. But I don't want to talk about any of those because today I want to talk about a matter that's important from both a legal perspective but also close to my heart. And that matter is the judicial review between Carolyn Burjoski and the Waterloo District School Board, which will be heard this coming week in Ontario Superior Court in London, Ontario. For those who haven't been following, Carolyn Burjoski made news headlines across Canada in January 2022 when the Waterloo Region District School Board shut down her presentation to the School Board Trustees. At the time, Carolyn was a teacher with the board, and her presentation brought forward concerns about the content of certain books available in her school's library. Some of these books were LGBT resources, while others were sexually explicit without centralizing LGBT matters. Carolyn's concerns were centralized around age appropriateness for their target audience and, in one case, trivializing and glamorizing the impact of transition. And here's a quick snippet of her being cut off by the chair.
We teachers received a long list of books and resources for Transgender Awareness Week. Some of these books are a positive addition because they show diverse families and represent a variety of ethnicities. However, I am very concerned that some of the resources in our elementary school libraries are inappropriate for young children. In the book Rick by Alex Gino, a boy named Jeff keeps talking to Rick about naked girls. Rick is confused because he doesn't think about naked girls, so he wonders if something's wrong with him. Rick gets invited to the school's Rainbow Club, and he ends up declaring an asexual identity. While reading this book, I was thinking, maybe Rick doesn't have sexual feelings yet because he is a child. In fact, some of the books filling our libraries make it seem simple or even cool to take puberty blockers and opposite sex hormones. The doctor states that this hormone mixture will leave Shane infertile in the future. Shane's response is, "It's cool," a very typical adolescent response. This book's misleading because it does not take into account how Shane might feel later in life about being infertile. This book makes very serious medical interventions seem like an easy cure for emotional and social distress. And remember,
so I'm going to have to
Point of order.
Following Carolyn's presentation, she was placed on administrative leave, and news of her cancellation was national headlines across this country. Statements were made by the board that accused Carolyn of perpetuating transphobia and causing harm to transgender individuals. I learned about this through a board email that apologized for the transphobia that transpired in their recent board meetings. Anyway, I'll gloss over the details, but in time, Carolyn launched 2 causes of action against WRDSB and the chair of the board. One is a defamation suit for $1.75 million, and the second is a judicial review to ask the court to make a ruling on whether cutting Carolyn's presentation off was justified within the law. That judicial review is the case that will be heard next week. Now, this is the kind of tantalizing news headline that would be interesting to me no matter what. But in this case, it is especially noteworthy because Carolyn is a dear friend of mine. I met Carolyn in 2022 when I ran for school board trustee. I actually ran in large part because of Carolyn. Once the issue flared up in our school board, I knew that it would be a hot topic in our trustee elections, and I suspected that I might be one of the few people who would bring tempered perspective to the matter. Being transgender, I appreciate and have personal experience with transphobia and the challenges that transgender individuals face. I think it's important that we present transgender individuals with human dignity and protect their rights to expression. But at the same time, Carolyn raised genuine concern about some of the books that are available in our libraries, and I share her belief that some of the books that we are putting in front of our children are providing unrealistic portrayals of the impact of transition. Even if a determination was made that these books were not problematic, we find ourselves in a very problematic political discourse if it's considered transphobic to even raise questions for investigation. So I ran for trustee and I didn't get elected, but through the process I had the opportunity to get to know Carolyn personally, and she ended up being formative in helping me build up my confidence to speak up the way I do now on transgender matters. Truth be told, when I first engaged with Carolyn, it was partially out of curiosity whether she was actually transphobic. Local newspapers, along with statements from my school board, had unequivocally painted that she was. I knew better than to think that the concerns about the books were themselves transphobic, but it was certainly possible that Carolyn held deep disdain for the transgender community, and that she was simply using books as a wedge to cause division. And I wanted to find out. For 2 months during the campaign, I only communicated with Carolyn via email. That's kind of incredible because I can now look back at the progression of our messages. We started communicating very formally. I think we both had elements of skepticism as we tried to suss out each other's intention. I wanted to know if she was actually transphobic, and she, having just launched her lawsuits, was understandably cautious about individuals who may be looking to disparage her. By the time we reached Election Day at the end of October, we were speaking to each other like we had been friends for years. We still hadn't met in person, but our conversations had veered away from the topics of our school board, and we were now discussing God and spirituality equality and Winston Churchill and so much more. And the day before the election, I got the courage to ask her point blank what she thought of transgender individuals like myself. And this is a portion of what she wrote back to me. People are so quick to judge, and it's concerning. I believe we need to stop grouping people into rival identity groups and instead look into each other's eyes and see common humanity. I haven't had the pleasure yet of looking into your eyes, but I know that it doesn't matter to me how you identify, what you believe, or what your politics are. You're a human being and worthy of love. That started a wonderful friendship that's grown ever deeper over the past 7 months. I've regularly found myself out with Carolyn well past midnight as we dive into so many interesting and riveting conversations. Carolyn is old enough to be my mother, and she's been more affirming in my life and transition than my parents have. I'm so thankful to have her in my life to provide wisdom and guidance. When I'm in a crisis, which has happened more than once with the challenging conversations I'm placing myself within, Carolyn is the person I call to ground me and provide support and guidance. I made a video a few weeks ago about an Ontario education Twitter space I was participating in where someone criticized the hosts and speakers for allowing me, a transgender individual, to partake in the discussion at all. When that happened, Carolyn was the first individual to speak up and defend me as someone with the right to participate, whose opinions matter, and whose dignity should be protected. At the same time as this was happening, Carolyn was also messaging me privately to ensure I was not too shaken up by the treatment I received. All of this is to say that I get pretty worked up when I see attacks against Carolyn online and by local individuals who continue to deride her as transphobic. These are individuals who have never once even spoken to her, let alone taken the time to actually get to know her. It leaves me enraged to watch someone who has been so kind, accepting, and loving towards me be canceled as transphobic based on a narrative that isn't even based in reality. I completely understand why Carolyn has brought her cases forward. Carolyn's hearing will be next week, and it's incredibly important as it sets precedent for other incidents that continue to play out across our school boards. How Carolyn's case is ruled will have a significant impact on whether we allow transgender matters to be discussed in school boards at all, or whether we uphold the principle that to question any policy, procedure, or decision done in the name of transgender individuals is inherently transphobic, regardless of the concern being raised. As I've said in so many other videos, transphobia does exist, and being a public transgender voice, I encounter the worst of it on a daily basis. We should take a stance against hate and contempt where it exists, because it has no place in an inclusive society. That being said, we are treading in very dangerous territory when we begin to label people like Carolyn as transphobic simply for raising concerns related to queer theory's proliferation in the classroom. Let's hope that next week, the court rules in support of the ability to raise concerns and have conversations. I'm going off script for the end, Carolyn, but I love you so much. I wish you all of the best luck next week during your hearings, and I can't wait to see the results. Talk to you soon. Bye.